Warning, spoilers. Possibly. Well, we can only hope. The recent, possibly not meant to have been tweeted at all document that has swept across the internet faster than if it had been carried on black wings was a letter written by George R.R. Martin in 1993. The original outline for his newly planned epic fantasy series, that which we have all come to know and be broken by, A Song of Ice and Fire. Or just Game of Thrones for those who watched the TV series first. This 3-page document originally accompanied a handful of chapters, which George R.R. Martin used to ply HarperCollins to taking on a project I'm sure he assured them wouldn't really take that long to write. It gives a rough overview of what will happen throughout his proposed tale. However, George has often stated, and the letter itself reiterates, that he doesn't like to know exactly where he's going with a story before he writes it. This letter was obviously written in a time before the man had penned out exactly which lesser Frey would end up not marrying Robb Stark. But devoid as it might be of all the tiny details, the inclusion of which would inevitably lead to a document the size, shape, and in fact exact composition of the full set of novels. It does contain some broad strokes of ideas. We're not to celebrate great revelations so soon, though. Firstly, the ending of even this piece hides away between vast swathes of black marker. And the rest, the words we can just about make out from the potato-quality iPhone photos. It is clear that even those vague outlines which George entertained over 20 years ago have changed hugely. So the question all thronies are now desperately hissing at each other is, can we actually draw any information from this letter at all? The process of writing has clearly really altered Gurm's initial thoughts. As it should, I would say. These simple ideas have their complexity realised in the process of stitching them out. The homogeneous cast you thought would all be friends, would be twisted love interests, actually show themselves as individual standalone characters. But anyway, let's get down to the nitty-gritty. Let's overanalyze every phrase of this missive and come up with some tinfoil bedecked predictions. I think the first thing this letter can tell us, kind of worryingly, is about the progression of the series. It's been long known that Gurm planned for a trilogy, and the letter elaborates on that. Its original books are listed as A Game of Thrones, A Dance of Dragons, and The Winds of Winter. Obviously we don't know exactly what ended up in what book, but the naming does make you wonder if all of A Clash of Kings, A Storm of Swords, and A Feast of Crows bled out of the one single volume. If so, might the idea to finish the whole thing in just 2 more, albeit mammoth-mounted giant-sized tomes, be a bit optimistic? Gurm's original character plans are really interesting to compare. Sansa seems a lot more interesting and a lot more realistic character in a lot of ways. In a way, original parts of her character, such as the sacrifice of all else for a child, seem to have been put into Cersei, who isn't mentioned at all in this outline. Actually, maybe what it really boils down to is the enmity of the audience. That has been transferred from her, and is now found, really, in the Lannister Queen. Although even the audience's view of Cersei is complicated in Feast for Crows. Dany's relationship with her brother and her husband have also turned out much more complicated. This seems to have drawn her as simply loving one and hating the other, whereas both relationships in the final piece were obviously much more complicated. In fact, the scales seem to have tipped much more the other way. In the final product, although there is the idea that she should love her brother for the familial ties and hate this man she's basically been sold to, the way they both treat her and the freedoms and affection they give or don't give to her really lead her to emotions different from what you would expect. With regards to the plot taking place beyond the Wall, the letter refers to both the undead and the Neverborn, which is something we can really speculate about with regards to the end of the 4th series TV show. If we consider Craster's stolen children and their role in all these mysterious goings-on, they could be something we could classify under this label of Neverborn. We've always known there was something more than just the cold zombies to the others. Maybe this is an expansion on that unknown. Probably the most interesting part of the letter, possibly the part we can actually argue might still hold some sway, is the promise that 5 central characters will make it through to the end. Does this mean the listed Tyrion, Dany, Arya, Bran and Jon will actually survive? This would be a great collaboration to all the people responding to the stabbing of Caesar-esque scene which happens at the end of Dance of Dragons. Those who, like myself, simply cannot accept that Jon might be dead. Whether he warged away or whether Melisandre is going to give him a fiery kiss, I don't think Jon is lost to us yet. I am slightly worried, though, that now George R.R. Martin will go on a killing spree in response to the wide proliferation of this missive. He's not someone I would put it past to finally kill my babies when I just thought they were safe. Let's get to the bit that had everyone eyes wide. Arya will be more forgiving, until she realises with terror she has fallen in love with Jon, who is not only her half-brother but a man of the Night's Watch, sworn to celibacy. This seems ridiculous as the plot has actually played out. Not just because of their ages, differing and both of them quite young, but also because their journeys have taken them to completely different places, emotionally and geographically. My ultimate response to it, which might be something I'm completely on my own with, is that imagining Arya in any sort of romantic relationship is really rather difficult for me. Although, in a way, she has been forced to grow up fast. She's been through many traumatic events. Even with the various guises she adopts, there is still, to me, something very childish about her sexuality. That might be set to change, though. I'm sure those who've read the Mercy chapter from the beginning of Winds of Winter are all ready and set to respond to me. To conclude, seriously, George, could you fit any more incest into this story arc? Really? What do you guys think? Is something of this ilk still likely to happen? Will Arya and Jon ever meet up again, let alone be involved romantically? I personally think the stories have veered way too much. A small part of it, though, which I'm grinning at with self-satisfied elation is until the secret of Jon's true parentage is finally revealed in the last book. I would say this is the final, ultimate confirmation that L plus R equals J. But we all knew that already, right? Book 1 had us, self-confidently claiming the mystery completely solved. Finally, let's talk about Tyrion. His story again now seems so different, but there is one line that pulls at my heart. Tyrion will change sides, making common cause with the surviving Starks. My dream would be to see Tyrion on the same side as the Starks. But then the idea that even the Starks are still on the same straightforward, unified side is kind of ridiculous now. I still live in hope, though, that these 5 characters that George R.R. Martin originally promised us might just live to the end, that they might just be okay. They might not necessarily live past the final few pages, but maybe even to the slightest extent their hopes and dreams might be somewhat realised. Maybe it might just be that they die having found some closure to those things that tormented them. This is what George R.R. Martin has brought me to, simply hoping that characters might be able to smile once or twice before the final bloody end. So guys, what are your predictions for the end of the series? Did George R.R. Martin's letters confirm suspicions, shock you to oaths, or maybe even inspire some new beliefs? Do let me know in the comments. I love discussing A Song of Ice and Fire predictions. The tinfoilier, the better. With that, I shall see you in my next video. Bye, guys.